Welcome back to the WISBE Career Advice Podcast. I'm your host, Javier, and today's guest is someone who redefines what it means to show up with a purpose in healthcare. I'm joined by Randi Anderson, a certified surgical technologist, trauma specialist, educator, and founder of Hero Health Solutions. Here are some highlights from the episode ahead.
It's never too late to be what you might have been. It's never too late to take that step, whether it be anything in your day-to-day life, right down to your profession or just some aspect of your life is not satisfactory to you, is not beneficial to you, and it's not bringing you joy. Change it. It is never too late to be what you might have been. I can't tell you how many surgeons have told me time and time again that they could not do what we do, but more importantly, they can't do what they do without us. The surgeons knew who I was because they had seen my face. I never spoke to them. I had never scrubbed in with them, but they knew my face. They knew that I was present. They knew that when I was in the room, I was helpful. I would go run for what they needed. I would open sets if they needed. I would clear clutter if that's what they needed. I would adjust their headlight if that's what they needed. They knew because I was in there and I was willing to put myself in that. So that's what I would say is the biggest thing. There's always something to learn. And if you have downtime, find a way to learn it. It's okay to say that you don't know something, but it's not okay to not be willing to learn it.
Randi began her journey at Tulsa Tech, where she completed a rigorous 10-month surgical technology program that launched her into a career at the heart of the operating room.
And so for a physician, you have to be a little bit accommodating because, as I said before, it's great that they know all of the steps to the procedure, but you have to be prepared for their steps, not just the textbook steps. One of the hardest things that, in my opinion, you're ever going to scrub is an open heart case. The complexity of doing an open heart is pretty extensive. I have done procedures, total joints specifically, I would say are probably very difficult, or my spine cases, where there may be 70 pieces of equipment, specifically instrumentation, that I have to put together, and it goes in a very specific sequence. And so when I say you look like a rock star, you have this lined up in a perfect sequence so that when they're done with this, you know this comes next. And you have it there, you have it ready to rock. They don't have to wait. It's together as it should be.
What started as a stepping stone toward medical school quickly became something much deeper, a calling, rooted in precision, advocacy, and high-stakes care.
You take out somebody's gallbladder, they're not going to have a gallbladder pain anymore. There's no gallbladder there. There's a problem. And we were able to go in and fix it. We're able to kind of check that off their list, and you get some finality and sense of accomplishment from that. If you like being involved in patient care, but you're maybe not a people person, this is great. Your patients go to sleep. They don't talk to you.
Since then, Randi has trained across nearly every surgical specialty and led a launch of multiple hospital departments, and even overseen the construction of a 23,000 square foot cardiovascular facility. But what truly sets Randi apart is how she blends technical excellence with mentorship, emotional resilience, and a fierce commitment to patient safety.
If you come in with this very closed off attitude, you can have all the knowledge in the world, and that's great. But if you're really not willing to learn anything, you are not going to be useful in an ever-changing environment. Surgery changes day to day. I have new reps, new products, new procedures, new techniques coming out all the time. You have to be willing to learn those. And again, you can't sit there and think that you're the smartest person in the room because you've done 400 cholecystectomies. Your 401st might be with something you've never done before. Emotions run very high in an OR. Be willing to put your personal feelings aside to know that sometimes you just got to get the job done. If a surgeon is asking me for something and I'm not handing it to them, or I'm not getting it to them in a timely manner, that's a difference. That's a ball game changer, if you will.
In this episode, we talk about how to stand out in the OR, lead under pressure, and why the phrase "tears aren't sterile," along with the story attached to it, could stay with you long after this episode is over.
When you think about going back to the beginning of how you got into surgical technology, what's that story like?
So for me, this was always supposed to be a stepping stone. And I did not know that this would turn into something I actually loved, something I'm passionate about. And it was meant to teach me another aspect of healthcare that I couldn't otherwise learn for preparing me to go to med school. Ever since I was a kid, I was going to med school. That was always the plan. There was never a plan B. We didn't do those. And to be perfectly honest with you, I still don't do those. Uh, everybody that knows me will tell you if I say this is what's happening, this is what's happening. I don't let anything derail me. Everybody that I know that knows me, I would say slightly intimately, just close quarters, they're like, God, what don't you do? And I always chuckle and I say, well, sleep. Because I don't get a lot of sleep. That's not something I prioritize if I have something that needs to be done. To say I'm goal oriented or goal driven is probably an understatement.
So when did you make the decision to go all in on surgical technology?
So I was 24 years old, and I had gotten my CNA and my CMA and my ACMA, and I was really still not interacting with physicians a lot to have the experience that I wanted to. And I just started looking. I always knew I wanted to go into surgery. To me, there was just something magical about a surgical theater. I mean, they don't call them that anymore. They call them ORs. But that's what these are. They literally used to be set up as theaters for people from around the world would come in. This is not good for aseptic technique or sterility or patient care. Don't recommend it anymore. But back historically, they came in and they sat in like stadium seats that were peered in so that they could be down and seeing all that was going on. One of the most probably historically accurate movies that actually depicts this is called Something the Lord Made, and it talks about blue babies and how they actually came to develop that surgical procedure that fixed that congenital defect. And in the movie, you see physicians crowded around in the stadiums, in the bleachers, whatever you want to call it. They're in there fully in observation to view this. And there's pictures of whenever they did the first cabbage of physicians literally standing on chairs, holding on to the lights above just to look in and see. And it's exactly that. This is a beautiful, orchestrated, rehearsed production, and we do it together. It is like a dance. And so I probably seem a little cliche even talking about it, but if you've experienced this firsthand, I don't mean like, oh, I had surgery and it was great. I mean, you've been in an OR when something magical has happened. I'll reference a former manager of mine. We recently had to do a procedure that was very unexpected with a physician that was like, oh, I maybe haven't done this since residency. And I said, well, sir, I have ample experience in this. I mean, no disrespect. If you'd allow me, I'll gladly walk you through it until the other surgeon arrives, who was not in facility. We had to call him in, but we didn't have time to wait, really. The patient had had a ventricle bleed, and we had to pivot and get through it. And so he said, tell me what to do. As soon as I started calling out what I needed, I had a team in there with me. I'm scrubbed in, me, my physician, and his PA, and anesthesia is up top doing their thing, and I have my team of circulators and my other scrub that's in there as backup for me. And I just start calling out what I need, and in like almost perfect synchronicity, everybody got exactly what I needed. Started popping sets, opening them, and all the while the room got silent so that I could dictate to him what he needed to do while I did what I needed to do. And she said that was by far one of the most beautiful things she experienced in an OR. And we had a conversation that followed that really spoke about the importance of what my job is in an OR. It's one thing for the surgeon to know what to do. It's another thing for me to have what they need to do it. So if I don't know what to ask for and what set it's in, what sequence it comes in, how it goes together, and more than that, like what part we're actually in, why it's important on the patient, what the anatomy of the patient looks like to tell me what size I need of whatever it is I'm getting, it doesn't matter how much my surgeon knows. And so I was telling her just how important this role is and the emphasis that I hope departments and hospitals really start placing on what we do, because of how quickly that most beautiful experience in that OR could have very quickly became the worst experience she's ever had in an OR. And that is the reality of it, and how quickly it can turn that way.
So you bring up a really good point, Randi. So that sounds like a very complex and unique situation that, I mean, I couldn't imagine being in doing anything like that in my life. But you didn't obviously leave school and immediately have that capabilities. So how did you prepare? How did school prepare you, or how did your career prepare you to be successful in that situation?
So as you can tell from my backdrop, I'm not in just a standard office. I'm actually at a school, a technical school in Tulsa, Oklahoma, called Tulsa Tech. This is where I got my start. This is the school and the program that prepared me. I had physicians, Donna Jones, she's a clinical educator at a local hospital now, and Richard Hadley, they were specifically my instructors. And when I say I had people behind me that believed in things that I didn't even know existed in front of me, those two were instrumental in that pathway. I remember many conversations that I had with Richard, and they weren't gentle, loving conversations either. There was probably one of them, because mind you, I was 24 years old, and where Richard looked at me and said, "Shut up and get over yourself." And I was like, "Did you just say that to me?" But I needed to hear it. And it made me all the better. I was like, you know what? I'm not always right. And it's about time I realized that. And so I probably would have been a lot more successful a lot early on if I had realized that it was not as important for me to be the smartest person in the room, but rather the opposite. If I'm ever the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room. You should always want to put yourself in a room where there's others you can learn from. That's where I got to where I am. I made sure that I stepped into a room that had people full of knowledge that in my wildest dreams, I wouldn't even think to go Google. And it doesn't come up by you asking certain questions. A lot of the things that I've learned have just really come up organically. And that's what's made them stick. That's what's made them really powerful in all that I do. So I wouldn't say that I've asked specific questions to gain knowledge that I have. Rather, I've just put myself in a room where at one point in my life, I would say I probably didn't belong because I didn't have the knowledge base. I didn't have the intellect to speak on matters that they were speaking about, but I sat there and I listened to them. And in everything they said, I made sure I was a sponge. I could be up at the front desk and they are talking about a situation that has to do with my patient, about when we're going to roll, what conditions that patient may be in. And they may not specifically be pertinent to my job for exactly what I'm going to do, but they do become specific to my patient care. For example, if they're talking about a patient that has a latex allergy, that becomes very pertinent for what I do. But then when we go to place a Foley, that starts at the beginning of a lot of our surgical procedures. We go to place one, I might say, hey, we haven't done our timeout yet. Did you by chance remember to check and see that this patient has a latex allergy? Well, I typically don't have access to the chart. That's not something I would have known ahead of time before my nurse told me. But because I sat up at the front desk and I listened, or I watched them write latex allergy next to my patient's schedule, those are things you pick up. It's about being observant. It's about being a sponge in every aspect, whether you feel it pertains to you or not. Sometimes that phrase, knowledge is power, it really is. And it can mean the difference of you being able to step into a room and feel confident, or step into a room and think like, oh, I'm just way out of my league.
So in surgical technology, it's obviously you've been able to gain a lot of knowledge from being at the right place at the right time, putting yourself in those situations to learn from intelligent people and other people that have been in the game for a long time. So would you say that the on-the-job training is more important than the school, or no?
No, I would say that this right here, your foundations are, I don't even have a word to stress the importance of how big these foundations are. So I'll kind of give you an example. This leads into something else that I have been really working on in my career. In the state of Oklahoma, it is not a law that you have to be certified to do what I do. What that means is that you could come in off the street to some of my local hospitals here across the state of Oklahoma, and they could put you in an OR with somebody and say, here, go learn. You haven't had pharmacology. You don't know your dosing calculations. You don't know your pediatric cautions, whether they can have a medication called neosynephrine or not, or Afrin, what we use every day. It's a nose spray. But there are different medications that are contraindicated in pediatric patients that unless you have specifically been taught that, you would never know. And if you've never been trained in that specialty, you really don't know. But they're going to put you in there and they're going to teach you those instruments. And then you learn the steps of the procedure, which is great. And you know the basic of it, but there's a lot more nuances that go into it. My foundation here taught me aseptic technique. We learned microbiology. We had to learn pathology. We learned how to handle specimen. We learned what it goes in. We learned how all of our instrumentation is cleaned and what the importance of those chemicals are, what the importance of the temperatures that they have to reach, 273 degrees for a minimum of a certain time frame. So then now you have to understand the time frame that it takes to heat that up to that to kill all the microorganisms, and then how long it has to cool before you can touch a patient with that. So whenever we talk about being in a surgery, oh, this fell on the floor, oh, this was contaminated, you have to be able to notify your surgeon, hey, Dr. So-and-so, I only have one of these. It fell on the floor. I have to flash it. That process takes a minimum of this amount of time. We can't roll until then. And you have to have those facts to back it up before you go tell a surgeon why he can't start on time. Otherwise, what do you mean? Well, we're rescheduled at this time. Yes, doctor, that's great, but we have to have this to start. Or to go one step further, if you know your job well enough, I know that I don't need that one item until 45 minutes into the procedure. I know that it's a 30-minute processing time. So I have 15 minutes of leeway plus or minus on either side to get back to safety for using what I need to use. So that may be the difference in delaying my case or not. I still absolutely go make sure my surgeon's aware of it, but I say, hey, you don't need this till about 45 minutes in the procedure. We're ready to roll now. It's going to take 37 minutes to turn it over. They'll bring it right down to me. We'll do this, this, and this. Are you okay if we roll? You want to wait 10 minutes and roll? What plan would you like us to execute here? But unless you've done that and you know the sterility process to get to that point, you're not prepared for your job. You don't know what to tell your surgeon. But then we'll go a step further.
There's more.
But wait, there's more. So in school, we're taught a basic setup. I'm not sure if you guys can see it behind me, but there's a table back here. And this procedure is actually set up for a C-section or a general small abdominal case. That's the basic of what we're taught. We are taught to do that in a matter of minutes for a quick setup. That has to do if we have to do an emergency XLAP. That's our basic trauma procedure, and it's your bread and butter. If you start with that case, you can expand and build upon it based on your medical terminology training, your anatomy and physiology training, and you know what structures you have to go through in the body to get to whatever you're trying to fix. You don't learn that just stepping into an OR and learning the instrumentation. Anybody can hand a doctor what they ask for, but it's a whole other thing to, and I'm going to quote one of my favorite physicians, Dr. Capel Spence. He is a neurospine specialist in Oklahoma City. And he gave a presentation for me at the OKSA Fall State Assembly that we do, a state conference for continuity of education. And it talks about being a part of the team. It's one thing to anticipate the surgeon's needs, which we are in fact taught as scrub techs, but it's something completely different to actually know what that involves, what part the surgeon is on. It's okay to say, hey, doc, can I look? And, you know, I lean over and all the times I'm scrubbed in with him, sometimes just to be a pain to get in his way, but, you know, when patient safety permits it. But you have to truly be involved in that procedure. You should be and want to be 100% in the know of what steps that doctor is on. And unless you have the training that I got here at Tulsa Tech, like I said, this is my stomping grounds. This is where it all began for me. You can't do that. And it is very hard to look at another professional and say, I'm sorry, you can't do what I can do. It is not a matter of putting me above anything. It's about putting what I was taught. There is a different level of ethics that comes with it as well. The biggest thing that, and I hold strong to this every day when I do any case, is surgical conscience. What that means is I have to have the ability to stand strong in my training and at any point in time call any professional, and that means surgeon or other scrub tech, nurse, it doesn't matter. Say, hey, I think you broke my sterility. We need to fix that. And sometimes you get pushback. We're taught not to. When in doubt, if you're ever questioned on your aseptic technique, you're taught to immediately break and fix it. There is no arguing. There is no going back and forth, because when in doubt, why wouldn't you just want to make sure? And so you're taught that. And we are taught our sterile zones. We're taught our aseptic technique, and it is extensive. There are do's and don'ts. There are places that are okay to touch. There are places that are okay to slide over the drapes, but that you don't touch. It's book answers and real life answers, and you have to know how to combine them. And without this background, you don't. So as I said before, this kind of leads into something that I've been very passionate about. I've actually been working on getting some legislation through. I've been a director on the board for Oklahoma State Assembly for the Association of Surgical Technology for quite some time. And I have partnered with some of our legal team. We've had a lobbyist in the past and getting some legislation written up. And I've met with some of our senators in the state of Oklahoma to work on getting that to the floor and getting that actually passed. What that does is that puts a big emphasis and a level of importance on what we do. From the day I graduated my program, I'd had 130 surgical cases under my belt.
Wow.
So those are spread across multiple specialties. I have to have 40 40 general surgery cases. I have to have 10 in every other specialty. So plastics, orthopedics, urology, obstetrics and gynecology, neuro, spine, the list goes on. And then you have a what we call like a elective selection that you can get additional cases to make sure that you hit that level of criteria for requirement. But you do have a bare minimum of cases that you have to scrub, and you not only have to first scrub them, you have to do what's called first scrubbing them. That means you have to open, you have to set up, you have to be a part of the opening count, closing count, and passing instruments all in between. You have to be a full lead on that. And now, granted, the beauty of what we do in clinicals is you have somebody there with you. So you have a safety net, someone's there making sure you're good and making sure you don't mess up. But once you get to a certain point and you're like, oh, this is my third clinical rotation, they say, you got it. And they expect you to step up and do it. You have to want to do this. You have to take initiative. And more than anything, you have to take pride in it. You have to remember that while you're doing a job, your job affects somebody's life. And we often get so desensitized to that the minute those drapes go up. It doesn't become, it's very easy, sorry, it doesn't become, but it's very easy for us to allow that to become just a liver that I'm working on. I don't see that patient's face anymore. I see just the liver. And we often lose sight of that because we're so focused on the procedure itself. But when you take a step back and you look at the big picture of it, you are truly affecting someone's life in every capacity. If they get a post-operative infection, that means additional bills. That means additional time off. That means additional downtime. That means potential exposure to their family. That means restriction to some family. For a mother that gets an infection, say she just had a C-section, and now here she is postpartum and she's hurting so bad she can't even bend over to pick up her newborn baby. So not only now are we affecting her life, we're affecting her child's life because that's bonding. So there's a trickle down effect, and you think that your job is so minute and you're so isolated to this. And when you look at the big picture of it, you really do take an instrumental part of people's lives the minute you elect to become part of their surgical team. And so I have taken a very big passion in trying to get that level of importance recognized, that from the minute I graduated my program, technically, I was the only one trained in an OR to do what I was taught to do. When a physician graduates med school, they have additional on-the-job training that's required called a residency or a fellowship program. Anesthesia providers, same thing. Physicians, residency program, they go through an anesthesia residency, anesthesia fellowship. Nurses, whenever they're hired, at minimum, go through 6 months of training to be able to be an OR circulator. But the minute I graduated and I went through hospital orientation, I maybe was with somebody for a week before they said, go be free. Go do what you were trained to do. And I'm expected to step into that and do that with the utmost confidence and preparation for my patients. That is literally what I was trained to do and what my expectation is. Wow. So for someone to step in that has not had my training on a, formal level, it can be very detrimental to patient care. And in certain procedures, because we take call, once you are off on your own, you are expected to take call. And sometimes you are thrown into a procedure that you maybe have never done. But with my background, I know based on what the procedure is called, my knowledge of anatomy, my knowledge of medical terminology, just my background of surgical instruments, because we're taught tons of instruments in school and instrumentation, and how they're used, what parts of the body they're used for. Or even if I don't know the name of it, if I have a surgeon, for instance, needing to do a brain surgery and take off a skull, to be able to access the skull, we have to drill into it. You then have to cut it and elevate it off of the dura to be able to remove the skull.
That's wild.
If you can't do that fast enough, that's the difference in, let's use your mom, for example. A lot of older patients have falls and they hit their head and they have a brain bleed. That brain bleed increases intracranial pressure and causes significant other damages and deficits. Little fun fact is time is brain. So if we don't get in there fast enough, that could be the difference in your mom, depending on where the bleed is, waking up and knowing your name or not.
Wow.
Remembering that she's your mom. The brain has so many parts of it that we don't know about. And so what we do know is that time is of the essence. So if you don't know how to do all of the steps to get that doctor in there fast enough, you could be the cause of it. And it has nothing to do with the fact that you weren't smart enough. It goes back to you were never trained with someone standing there with you on how to do a cranie. And now you're on call because that's the need of the hospital. And you maybe don't know how to do it fast enough.
That's nuts. The first thing that comes to my mind is, how did you learn all of these things? and so how long is the schooling that you went through?
So whenever I went through this program, it was a 10-month program straight through, with the last half of that being clinicals, 4 days a week for 8 hours a day. And that's how you.
And you lived in the OR.
Yes. From the minute I got into the hospital, we were involved in shift huddle, and we got our assignment for the day. We were introduced to our preceptor, And then they would say, okay, let's go. You looked at the schedule board. You saw you had a lap appy, a lap chole, a mass excision. If you're doing general service that day, you might have a pilonidal cyst. You might have an abscess, a laparoscopic laparoscopy just for diagnostic purposes to look in. You might have to go do what's called lysis of adhesions. And that tells you how to prepare for your day. If I see I have 8 cases, I go get 16 gowns and 36 gloves. And I have them outside my room prepared because if at any minute I have a sterility break, I need to break out of my current gown and gloves. I need to scrub into new ones, and I need to be able to do that quickly for efficiency for my patient in my case. You learn to do that as a student.
Wow.
In a trauma, so for just how I learned all of these things, I didn't learn every single one of them in school, but they all gave me, everything I did learn in school is what gave me the confidence to where if I had one of my charge nurses or my board runner say, hey, Randi, you're out of a room. I've got a doctor that really needs to add something on. Are you okay with doing that? I never said no. One of the common things that I hear is, oh, I don't know how to do that case. I've never done that case. There were several cases that I'd never done until I did it. And I always was willing to do that. I made sure that at the end of 5 years, I knew how to do every single specialty. For the last 2 years, I have specialized in cardiovascular more so than doing other specialties, but that has led to me doing department openings. That has led to me doing immense training. I helped launch a cardiovascular and thoracics department in Texas with the director there. It was phenomenal. That also led to me, because I applied to be a scrub here back in Oklahoma, that was on a travel contract, that I interviewed to be a CV tech here. And as I was interviewing with the COO, she said, well, tell me a little bit about what you do now. And I was talking about all of the training that I had undergone, the overview of the policies and the procedures, the steps to do a bring back. I revamped their sets, went over all of their sutures, went over all their preference cards, made sure all of these things were correct. And she said, oh, well, I know you're interviewing for this, but I have this huge need. Well, that need was to be an executive management, a cath lab director, and a project manager. So I then started partnering with IT infrastructure teams, structural engineers, a entire construction team, and yes, and an architect. And I oversaw the building and design and the implementation and the full carry out of a 23,000 square foot facility.
Just another day in the life of Randi.
Just another day. Again, I don't sleep.
It does help do more. Yeah.
So just the willingness to step into that. And there was a lot of things that I didn't know. Google became my best friend, and where Google fell short, I had resources. I may not have known the answer to these things, but because I put myself in those rooms that we talked about earlier, you bet that I always knew who I could call. My best friend, Jason, who is a CFO currently here in Oklahoma of a rural access hospital, he was a huge person that I called and said, hey, bud, I've got this portion coming up in my project. Who are some vendors that you look to for this portion in your project? What do you think? And that led me to be able to have access to tons of resources, people that had proven track records for integrity and excellent business. And so I had multiple meetings all the time. And I ended up managing probably a team of 75 or greater. I know one of my teams specifically for my cath lab was about 33 people deep. And so a 33 person email chain orchestrating 7 different teams within that. And that had to do with the guys that were doing all of my programming, all of my systems, my OR table, right down to making sure the floor was perfectly level for the exactness that we needed. So my site supervisor, my site superintendent, his name was Chase. He was phenomenal in helping with all of that. So if I hadn't been willing to put myself in those rooms, I wouldn't have been able to be successful in stepping into that portion and that role. From that role, I have now opened my own company. I have created and founded Hero Health Solutions, LLC. And in that, I do healthcare and construction consulting for healthcare projects, hyperbaric consulting and design. And then for fun, I actually contract with several facilities across the state of Oklahoma, teaching BLS providers, recertifying them and making sure that they're compliant with American Heart Association guidelines and American Red Cross as well. And so I definitely stay busy. And
that's an understatement. Yeah.
It has just really allowed me to step into rooms that I once thought I didn't belong in. And now I'm able to be in and be a part of those conversations in a meaningful way. And it let me step into a facility in Oklahoma. And I was pretty instrumental in launching a trauma department here. And that has led to some additional consulting for some exciting things, hopefully coming up in launching some trauma response across the state of Oklahoma. So stay tuned for that. But
nice. So going to the transition between school and practice, what do you, when you're talking to future surgical technologists that are coming out of school, there's got to be something outside of putting yourself in the right situation, because I think that that's very difficult to do. I mean, you have to kind of right place, right time, wait for the opportunity. And, of course, when you get the opportunity, take it. But what, outside of those things, what's the advice you give to the students transitioning into practice?
So whenever you step into an OR as a CST specifically, you're kind of considered low man on the totem pole. So just what you said, it's a lot more than just right place, right time. You have to build that rapport and build those relationships. And you do so by being personable, being helpful, being visible, always be willing to help. Like I said before, there was never a thing, a surgery, a task that I said, oh, that's not my job. My least favorite saying that I have probably ever heard through the course of forever is, that's not my job. Well, if my badge says, I'm going to use St. John's Medical Center because that's a huge hospital here, or St. Francis, or any hospital, Mercy, across the country, if my badge says that, it really doesn't matter what my title is. My job is to work for the benefit of my patients within my scope of practice for that hospital. And why wouldn't you want to? My favorite saying that I will forever hold on to, I actually have two of them, but one of them is something that my pastor, Pastor Mike Todd, said, at least a year ago. And it's, don't let your position change your posture. So you may step into an OR and be technically the low man on the totem pole. You have no longevity, you have no seniority, and you are put in probably the least favorite cases because you have to earn your time and you have to prove yourself before you get thrown into a massive trauma or a polytrauma, anything like that. You have to show that you can walk before you can run. So what I would say is step into those spaces and don't let that position change your posture. Don't ever let it tilt your head down or up. It's okay to hold your head high and walk parallel to the ground, but do that in full confidence and humility. It's okay to say that you don't know something, but it's not okay to not be willing to learn it. And that, I think, has been the biggest instrumental portion in getting me to where I am, is if I didn't know, you better believe I was getting ready to learn. And I always made it a point that I wanted to be the best at it. It's one thing to be good, but it's another thing to hold yourself. And this is a personal standard. It has nothing to do with what my managers demanded of me. It has nothing to do with what my colleagues demanded of me. But more than anything, it had to do with a personal responsibility that my patients deserved my best every single time. We lose patients in the OR. I will never forget, I did a case where we lost a baby. That's probably the hardest thing that you could ever imagine going through. I had a mother life flighted in, and her baby was alive when they left the ground, and it was not when they landed. We had to tell her before we put her under surgery or under induction, under anesthesia, that her baby hadn't made it. And I'll never forget that physician reaching over to me, squeezing my hand as I had tears welling up in my eyes. I'm a mom of 4, and telling me tears aren't sterile. We've got a job to do. We'll cry in the hall afterwards. And you know what? We did that job. We did our very best for that mom, got her the very best outcome that we could possibly get from an awful situation. And we did exactly what she said. We finished that case. We got our patient off to where she needed to go and stable. And then she said, all right, let's go. We went into the hallway and we did exactly that. We cried. We're human. You have to feel those. But then, I don't know, 5 minutes into our cry, all of our pagers go off. We have a polytrauma coming in. So guess what? Those tears aren't sterile, and we did everything we could for that patient. You have to be able to step into your next position with your best, and knowing that you did everything you could. You gave that patient your best. Now this next one needs your best too. So in every single patient, whether I'm feeling it or not, whether I have a lot going at home or not, this is the one place where I can come and give it my best and feel peace with that, regardless of what the outcome is. You have good ones and you have bad ones. You have awful days in an OR sometimes. But what gives you hope for the next case is knowing that each patient has deserved your best. And that's a standard that you uphold and that you refuse to let diminish down. That is what drives patient care.
So that actually is a really good segue, because of the fact that I think that what you just described, there's a number of people that could do that type of job. And most of them, when you think about it, they're the doctors. When you're coming out of high school, you think that that's the doctor, that you and the doctor are just two doctors that did that and do this on the regular. Did you know when you were going through school that this is the level of intensity that you were going to see in practice?
So I actually did. I got a very unique opportunity when I was a student. One of my clinical instructors also happened to work at a hospital on her off days from the school, and she was my preceptor for the day. I got to float and go to labor and delivery, and we got to do, and I say got to because it is a privilege. Though the outcome is not great, I did have the privilege to hold that mom's hand because we had what we call a fetal demise. And students are typically not allowed to do those because of the level of sadness that comes with it. You have to have a level of emotional maturity. And then, like I said, on that last case, it's okay to cry, and it is absolutely okay to feel things. In fact, if you ever don't feel any of these things, you probably are no longer where you need to be. And so I will never remember Phyllis telling me, hey, this is the case. Can you do it? And this is one of those things. I was pregnant. I was 9 months pregnant, maybe 8 months at the time, going through my program. And I was getting ready to deliver and help a surgeon deliver this mom's baby that was not going to ever take a breath. I'll never forget his face. I will never forget his little arms and feet and the color he was when he came out. But I got the opportunity to be a part of handing that mom her baby so that she could let him know that he was loved. Even for that brief amount of time, she got to let him know that he was loved. And it wasn't just by her. We're standing there holding her hand. We're an extension of her, pouring love into that baby that will never know what his life could have been. And that was the moment that I think it became so real. We have finality. That's one thing that a lot of us love. And a lot of the personalities are kind of similar in what we do. We love the finality of being able to check something off our list as accomplished. think of, this is why I, no offense to anybody who does, I have no interest in primary care. You see the same patients over and over again, and oh, Mrs. So-and-so, have you been watching your sugars? Well, I had a Snickers bar yesterday. Okay, we've talked about this. Mr. So-and-so, have you stopped smoking yet? Oh, no, it's so hard. It's the same thing over and over again. But on surgery, you take out somebody's gallbladder, they're not going to have a gallbladder pain anymore. There's no gallbladder there. There's a problem. And we were able to go in and fix it. We're able to kind of check that off their list, and you get some finality and sense of accomplishment from that. So, it really hit home that sometimes that sense of accomplishment isn't just removing a gallbladder, but it is helping somebody appreciate a life. And one of my favorite sayings, again, I thought I only had two, maybe I have three. It's kind of funny, actually, came from a comic book, Dr. Strange, go figure, who's also a neurosurgeon. Maybe that's why Dr. Spence is one of my favorites. Don't tell him I said that, though. I'll deny it. He in the comic, he has a saying, it's death is what gives life meaning. To know your days are numbered and live them well. And so I think that unless you really feel that or you see that, it's not real for you. In that moment of handing that mom her baby, death was absolutely what made my breath or the baby that was in my stomach even that much more precious. Whenever I did get to hold my son, probably less than a month later, I remember that baby, and I remember that mom and that dad, and just how special my nursing team became to me, how special my physician became to me, because of the gift that they were able to give me. I know for sure I could not have birthed my baby by myself. And so I think that having that moment that most of us don't get as students allowed me to appreciate more than what I do in my job, but also understand the intensity and the complexity of the emotions that I was going to need to be prepared for. Maybe not on a day-to-day basis, but it does happen at some point. Yeah. And it gave me a full circle and a full reality of just how important my job was as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I would not be able to do what you do. So thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you.
And all I can think about now is, okay, you've just laid some really great wisdom about what, the practice of this is and, what a student could expect. Now, let's say we have our diploma in hand, we've got our certificate from the national board. Mm-hmm. We're interviewing for the position. Based on what you just told me, it would be a bad idea for me to go in there and go, I'm your person because I feel no emotion.
Correct.
So what do you do how do you stand out? Aside from, as you're pointing out, graduating from a great school to get that foundational knowledge, and of course answering the general questions of what to do, cases, scenarios, maybe some standard interview stuff. How do you stand out in an interview as a surgical technologist once you're going into the next phase of your progression of your career?
So as a student, this kind of leads up to that. So remember that when you're in your clinicals, you're doing those at local hospitals. Okay. You are on stage right then and there. How you perform, how you adapt, how you respond to criticism, those things are notated. So before you ever realize it, you're making a name for yourself. And the healthcare community really is not that big. I just finished working in Oklahoma City, and I remember the first day I walked in, there were 3 people that I didn't know worked there that I have known throughout my career. And it is like seeing somebody that you were friends with in high school, if you want. you haven't seen them in 6 years and you're like, oh my gosh, what are you doing here? Well, I work here. The healthcare community is not that big. So from the minute you set your name in the hat that you are a healthcare provider in any form or fashion, you're now being graded. That starts at clinicals, that starts at observations, as even medical students. When you are doing your shadowing experiences before you even become a med student, when you are doing your rotations, you are being observed, you are being graded, you are being considered. That is the biggest thing. You're being considered. Is this person somebody I want to work next to me? And I will tell you, having been in practice now for 7, almost 8 years, there have been students that have come through my ORs where after I finished their preceptor day with me, I would go to my manager and say, if that student is here tomorrow, I would like them. Because maybe they had a bad day. I want to find out. But if we keep having bad days, I will go to my manager and say, hey, if you hire that person, I don't want them on my team. Okay, well, why? And I have reasons. Oh, they're not receptive to when I'm telling them a physician prepares something. They're not receptive to this. And most of it has to do with attitude, willingness, and being receptive, being adaptable, and just really being personable. If you come in with this very closed off attitude, you can have all the knowledge in the world, and that's great. But if you're really not willing to learn anything, you are not going to be useful in an ever-changing environment. Surgery changes day to day. I have new reps, new products, new procedures, new techniques coming out all the time. You have to be willing to learn those. And again, you can't sit there and think that you're the smartest person in the room because you've done 400 cholecystectomies. Your 401st might be with something you've never done before. You have to be willing and open-minded to do that. And what sets you apart, what sets me apart now is that I can do every specialty. I didn't pigeonhole myself, which happens a lot. I made it a point to where I was able to do every single specialty. I put myself in places for that opportunity. I was very uncomfortable for a lot of cases because I didn't know. Now, granted, I had someone with me that did, but when you don't know and you don't know what comes next, and that's your job to know what comes next, it is very uncomfortable, especially for someone like me that I pride myself on being the best. Can't be the best if you don't know.
Yep.
So,
and really quick, so that's a good thought, because you've learned so much over your career that I am curious to know if you could repeat it. You have to learn. You're going to learn all the same stuff over again, because I know, based on what I know about you, you would go back and be like, all right, I got to go learn all the same stuff over again. And this is a Groundhog's Day scenario. Would you learn it in a different order to speed up the learning process? Because maybe something is, if I would have learned this first, I would have then known X, and then that would have, it's like a domino effect. Would you learn things differently?
Not in the sequence that I did, because this is going to sound crazy. I did them based on acuity and difficulty.
Oh.
So one of the hardest things that, in my opinion, you're ever going to scrub is an open heart case. The complexity of doing an open heart is pretty extensive. We have a ton of surgery, a ton of suture. You have a ton of instrumentation. You have a lot of steps in that procedure that are unforgiving. You have to know what comes next. You have to have that next suture. You have to have that next, what we call a snooze. So if you're going on bypass in a heart surgery and you're placing your cannulas, you have to have what holds those cannulas in place, because otherwise you're spilling that patient's blood out everywhere, and that's blood you can't get back straight out of their heart. So I made sure that CVOR was one of the last things that I learned, because I needed to be prepared for the level of stress that comes with it, for the level of intensity, for the speed, and just for the seriousness of it. My favorite thing about knowing every specialty is every different specialty comes with its own personality. If you know an orthopedist, I promise that your environment in an OR is not going to be the same as yours is with a cardiology specialist, with a cardiovascular surgeon. It's not going to be the same as a general surgeon. It's not going to be the same as a plastic surgeon. They all have their own personalities, and you have to be able to adapt to that personality. You have to be able to read the room and know what role you need to take. Is this a doctor you can crack jokes with and enjoy it? Or is this a doctor where you need to be very serious in all business? And you do have both. And both are beautiful in that's their comfort level. And that's the environment that they thrive in. And given that they're running the show, if you will, that's what you'd want your surgeon to do. You take your lead from them. You have to know how to be a good balance for them. If their right hand does this, what is you're their left hand, what do you do? And so, like I said, this becomes a dance. You have to know your partner. You have to know your surgeon. You have to know their preferences. And part of doing that is being where you're at in your career and in your knowledge base. And so everybody starts in general surgery. That's the one thing you have to be like the most versed at and the biggest requirement for sitting for your board for MBS TSA. And then from there, you can expand on it. And so I think that in the sequence that I did it, general and OB-GYN, orthopedics and ENT, you wouldn't think that ENT or orthopedics goes together, but it actually does. You break the bones of the nose sometimes, use the similar instruments, but they're much smaller. But then you do something called OMF, which is oromaxillofacial, and it kind of ties into ENT. They're two separate entities, but they both work on the face, the jaw, the facial structure. And so in that, you're placing plates and screws. And you're doing that in orthopedics too, plates, screws, for fixations, fractures. And so I kind of tied them in with how they were similar on instrumentation and steps. And based on that, that's how I wanted to get into that. And then furthermore, this is probably the biggest advice that I can give. And this is not just for students. This is for anybody practicing that wants to expand their knowledge. You do not have to be assigned to a case to go into one. If I was not in a case and I was not busy, I would go to my board runner and say, hey, Dr. So-and-so is doing a Whipple procedure. I've never seen one. I really like to go observe that. Can I make sure it's okay with the team and the surgeon? And if so, can I be in there for an observation? Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. I would go check in with that team, ask for permission to be a part of that room just for observation. And then that way I was in there. I may not have gotten to stay for the entire procedure, but I got to see the takedown. I got to see the steps. I got to see the setup. And then if my board runner needed me, she knew exactly where I was and that I was free to do whatever she needed me to do, he or she, in that moment. But they knew right where I was. So that goes along with being visible, communication, but putting yourself in a room that you may not be able to step in and do all the roles of it. I wouldn't have been able to step in on the first Whipple I ever saw and run it. I wouldn't have felt comfortable. I wouldn't have been able to do the first transplant that I saw. But whenever I was at OU Medical, which is a level 1 trauma center in Oklahoma, they do a ton of transplants. And thankfully, I made friends with one of the nurses that was in there. She's one of my best friends, Ashley O'Connell. And she was circulating. I said, hey, can I just come in and watch? Yeah, come on in and watch. And after enough times of coming on in there and watching, the scrub needed a bathroom break. Well, I'm a scrub and I'm in here and I've seen you do this about 15 times now. I'm confident enough that for 15 minutes, I could step in and help you out. Would you like me to scrub in so you can go to the restroom? Oh my gosh, that would be great. There's that opportunity. I was there. I was moderately knowledgeable. The surgeons knew who I was because they had seen my face. I never spoke to them. I had never scrubbed in with them, but they knew my face. They knew that I was present. They knew that when I was in the room, I was helpful. I would go run for what they needed. I would open sets if they needed. I would clear clutter if that's what they needed. I would adjust their headlight if that's what they needed. They knew because I was in there and I was willing to put myself in that. So that's what I would say is the biggest thing. There's always something to learn. And if you have downtime, find a way to learn it.
Yeah, that's a great advice. And the thing that comes to mind is what you mentioned at the very end of how the physician has seen you and has some familiarity with you. that's the piece that seems logical in my mind. If I were in the position to learn, then I need to, I don't want to say be friends with, because maybe the physicians aren't trying to be friends with all the other people that are around them. They have limited time. They're there to do a job. But how do you, I'm not going to say win favor instead of like an old, we're talking about theaters, we're talking about, how do you win favor with the physicians coming in? Maybe I'm just coming out of college or out of my technical school, and I've been in the game for a few months, but I really haven't gotten the opportunity. How do I start to kind of show my face more? Is it just getting in the room? What would you suggest?
That's a large portion of it. What I did specifically, anytime I scrubbed in with a surgeon, especially if it was my first time meeting them, I made it a point to say, "Good morning, Dr. Smith. My name is Randi Anderson. I'm your scrub tech today. I'm new to your facility. I'm not new to the OR." And I did that a lot of times before a procedure. If I was getting ready to do a procedure, doesn't matter if I've done that procedure 50 times with a surgeon I'd never done it with, I would make it a point to go find that surgeon, whether they were in the doctor's lounge or, dictation room. I would wait until they were not speaking or dictating or something, and that they looked up and acknowledged me. And I would say, "Good morning, Dr. Smith. My name is Randi. I'll be your scrub tech today. I see that I'm doing a cholecystectomy with you. I apologize. I've never done this procedure with you before. Is there anything that you do that may not be on your preference card? I want to make sure I have everything prepared for you." And so for a physician, you have to be a little bit accommodating because, as I said before, it's great that they know all of the steps to the procedure, but you have to be prepared for their steps, not just the textbook steps. And so we have these things called preference cards, and those preference cards literally tell you what the surgeon likes, or they're supposed to. That is probably, you can ask any scrub tech in the history of ever at every single hospital. That is one thing that we despise a little bit, because it's very hard to keep them correct. As I said before, this is an ever-changing environment. They get new techniques that they have learned. They get new products. And so as those products update, you have to update the card. And using technology, it's an imperfect system. Sometimes those populate and save correctly, sometimes they don't. So I just found that it was always a good practice to go introduce myself and make sure that they knew that I wanted to do my due diligence in making sure that everything was as prepared as it could be, not just for them. We often shift that focus that it's for our surgeon, but I needed to be prepared for my patient. That preference card is absolutely for the surgeon, but it's not just so that they can have their favorite scalpel. It is because that is what they're the most comfortable with. That is what they execute their skill the best with. So that's what gives your patient the best outcome. And I think that a lot of times we focus on pampering our surgeon, if you will, but really you're getting everything prepared for your surgeon to make sure that your surgeon is their best for the best patient outcome. And so that's what I made sure my physicians knew was, let me be the one to please get you what you need to the exact, so that I can make sure that our best outcome is there for our patient.
That's awesome. I had no idea that, even though I know this is not the case, that they had a rider, like movie stars and actors and actresses. They had a preference sheet. I mean, it's not blue Skittles or, make sure you have my diet soda, exact one that I want. But it makes sense. I mean, if you're really comfortable with, maybe, could it be a certain brand on their preference sheet? Could it be?
Absolutely.
Okay. So it can be that detailed. And how do you, what if you don't have that brand, or they just know because the hospitals have those brands, or how does that pair up?
A lot of hospitals have contracts with specific providers and specific companies. And so whenever you sign a contract, or those hospitals sign the contracts for those providers to come in, it's for certain products that fall within that product line. So a lot of times they already know, especially unless it's the nuance in that is if it's a new physician, of course, that has some variations. But if it's a surgeon that's established there and has been there for a while, they know what the facility has. And then furthermore,
Gotcha.
you have vendors and you have reps. Your reps, I will tell you now, do not get enough credit for what they do. I have been fortunate enough to have some phenomenal reps across my career that have made me look like a rock star. And I mean, like, actually. I have done procedures, total joints specifically, I would say are probably very difficult, or my spine cases, where there may be 70 pieces of equipment, specifically instrumentation, that I have to put together, and it goes in a very specific sequence. So if you have a good rep, they come in, they make sure you are lined up, they make sure you know how to use it. And so when I say you look like a rock star, you have this lined up in a perfect sequence so that when they're done with this, you know this comes next. And you have it there, you have it ready to rock. They don't have to wait. It's together as it should be. And so you have reps that come in. So kudos to my reps. Thanks, guys. You guys know who you are that have been in my career. But oh no, they'll appreciate the shout out, because truly, as much as I make or break them, they make or break me. And so my reps take good care of us and surgical techs. We work hand in hand. So the surgeon picks them, but then they're stuck with me whether they like it or not. So we try to make each other's life enjoyable. But
That's good.
Your reps also are responsible for trying to make sure that your surgeon has what they need, specifically if they are the ones providing it. And then if they're the ones providing it, they make sure that you have it open. They make sure that you have it ready. They help ensure the sterility and the efficacy of that product itself for the effectiveness of the patient. And then they make sure that you know how to use it. And hospitals are really good at that as well, in partnering with a lot of our rep companies in doing what we call in-services. And so those in-services are actually teaching courses where we go meet, and it can be 15, 20-minute little modules where they say what their product is, what it's used on, what specialty it's used on, and how it's used. This is how it goes together. This is the setting. And then you can put hands on it and use it and really kind of get to know that product so that you're familiar with it before you actually get into an OR.
That's amazing. So it's more learning, more education that you get on the mechanics, the biomechanics, on the materials. And is that all inside of some class of materials inside of the body, a part of what you learn in school as well?
We learn a good amount of these devices when we're in school. So the biggest thing that everybody uses probably in the history of ever for surgery is a bovie. Well, with a bovie, there's different settings. There's a cut feature, a coagulation feature. There's a suction bovie. There's a suction coagulator. There is
So before you keep going, could you tell me what a bovie is? Because I don't know what a bovie is.
So a bovie is what we have short, or an ESU. It's an electrosurgical unit. It is cautery. So it uses a circuit, an electrical circuit. You place a grounding pad on that patient, and it supplies a current, and that current is what gives you coagulation of tissue or cutting through tissue. And it's what allows you to dissect and get visibility for whatever anatomical structure you're working on.
Very cool.
That is one of the most basic things that we use. Everybody thinks of a knife when you do surgery, and that is absolutely correct. We do make a surgical incision using a 15 blade or a 10 blade, or sometimes an 11 blade. There are different blade types. You learn all of those in school. And those blades are based on what structure you're working on, how big your incision is, what the tissue type is, and so on. And you have to learn that in school. And it is also a physician preference. It's listed on their preference card. So once you make that incision, have you ever done a paper cut?
Yeah.
So you know, just a minor paper cut, your finger bleeds.
Right.
Well, imagine a large cut, and now you have ample bleeding. Can't really see anything. So you use the electric cautery unit or your bovie to cauterize those small burns at the top tissue layer. And then you use it to continually dissect through until you get to different structures. And then that's whenever you start doing dissection using specialized scissors called Metzenbaum scissors. You learn that in school. It's different than scissors, and those are different than tenotomy scissors. And you have a million different types of just scissors. And so you learn, you learn those steps of dissection in school, and you learn what instrumentation you have to use on the most basic level. And then from that is what you expand on as you learn your structure of each new procedure and each new setup.
So if, like myself, let's say that today I decided, you know what, I'm looking for my next career move because what I'm doing today may not really satisfy me, fulfill me. Is there anything that you could talk to in terms of either yourself or what you would suggest if you are into XYZ? If this is what you are looking for or like, then you should consider going into the surgical technology field.
I would say that if you have any interest in surgery at all, if you like some finality to what you do, if you really enjoy patient care and being a part of a team, surgery is your place. And I say that with some grains of salt. Surgery is a very unique place. I remember being a student and we were told, like, don't get your feelings hurt. And you're like, well, that's what this is all about. You have to have feelings. You care about your people. You want to be empathetic and compassionate. All of those things are true. But it is also very true that you have to be unoffendable. You have to remember that emotions run high when you step into an OR, and it's not about you. That's a really hard thing for people to understand, that while yes, you absolutely should have a level of professionalism, there should absolutely be a level of respect for your colleagues and your peers and the way that you speak to one another. There are times where I'm going to say, give me that now. And I'm going to say it just like that. I need it now. You have to understand the severity of mistake in your action or inaction. If a surgeon is asking me for something and I'm not handing it to them, or I'm not getting it to them in a timely manner, that's a difference. That's a ball game changer, if you will. And so if a surgeon is being very direct or even brash with me, I have to understand it's not about me. I don't know especially if I can't see, I don't know what my lack of action or inaction could lead to. So in that moment, my feelings don't need to be hurt. I don't need to. No, it's yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. In that moment, my feelings don't matter. We can talk about it after. And I will tell you, I have had to have some conversations after surgeries where I've gone to even physicians and I said, hey, don't know if you're having a bad day, but you spoke to me in this manner. I don't appreciate it. I would respect if going forward, we maybe handled that a little differently. But that comes once my patient is out of the room. That comes once my patient is taken care of. So you have to be able to put your feelings aside. So if you're someone that you can do that and you can truly put the job and the patient in front of yourself and humble yourself, then yes, this is an environment for you. But you do have to be unoffendable to a degree. You do have to be willing to put your personal feelings aside to know that sometimes you just got to get the job done. And then you can take care of it after. You can address that afterwards. And that really is the best time to do it. Addressing a concern with a patient on the bed is absolutely not an okay thing to do. Not if it doesn't concern the patient safety. If it's, and we can say de-escalation is a thing. Emotions run very high in an OR. This is not something that happens every day. You're not constantly having these TIF rehashes after every single case. It's once in a blue moon. Everybody has a bad day. And this goes a long way with rapport. You have to have a rapport with your surgeon too to be able to say that. And a lot of the portion of that is trust. So if you are any of these attributes of anything I've spoke about today, if that appeals to you, you do get specialized training. This is a very rare opportunity. This is also going to be kind of funny because you wouldn't probably expect this. If you like being involved in patient care, but you're maybe not a people person, this is great. Your patients go to sleep. They don't talk to you. They do to a degree.
I feel like that would come out at some point because that bedside manner and dealing with all that is something that I'm sure if you want to be in healthcare and help people, but maybe it's your point. Maybe the bedside manner is just not, you're just not down with it or something. It just doesn't hit you the right way.
It can be as simple. So sometimes my interactions with a patient, not that they're non-existent, but they're kind of non-existent until they're off asleep and I'm doing what I need to do with my physician for the surgical procedure at hand. It's not that I don't want to come talk to you. It's that I'm really focused on my field and I'm really focused on making sure that I have everything that you need. A lot of times what happens is I'll be scrubbed in and over at my field, kind of what you see behind me here, and my back will be to the patient. And so I'll be working, I'll hear them come in. I might stop and go over and say, "Hi, Miss Smith, I'm Randi. I'm going to be working with your surgeon today. I'll be taking care of you. You're going to hear me moving around back here. I'm just making sure that everything is perfect for your procedure so that we can take the best care of you possible. Try to relax. Anesthesia is going to have you off to sleep, but just holler if you need anything. I'm going to be over here getting things ready. Try not to let me disturb you too much, okay?" And that's probably a lot more extensive. It's because I am personable, I'm bubbly. I want to make sure that everybody feels, especially when you're about to go to sleep, that's a very uncertain and vulnerable state. I want to make sure that you know that I've got your best interest at heart. But sometimes some of my colleagues that have, "Hi, I'm Stacy. I'm going to be taking care of you. I work with Dr. So-and-so. I just wanted to say hi and introduce myself." And they go back to what they're doing. A lot of times your nurses will say, "That's Randi, that's Jeff, that's Josh. Josh is going to be doing your anesthesia. This is your surgical team today. We'll be all taking care of you. Let us know if you need anything. Give me just a second. I'm going to get you some warm blankets." So we all have a little role to play, and we do try to make sure that they feel as comfortable as possible. Sometimes that's a little bit more involved on my part. Other times it's not. Sometimes I may not be in there specifically when they roll with that patient. And I might be getting something outside of the room that I realized I didn't have. Okay, I need to go get that set and have it on hold just in case. I need to go get some backup sutures so that my nurse doesn't have to run for 27 suture in the middle of this case if we have a need for it. Dr. Johnson is always dropping that pickup. Let me go get a couple extra peel packs and have those over there for my nurse. So there are times when the patient comes in the room that I myself am not in there, so I don't have to have that interaction. But I absolutely take a pride and compassion, and I'm very passionate about the outcome for that patient. So if you're one that you want to have that impact in healthcare and you really want to be a part of what makes that change, but you are not comfortable talking to people, this is the spot for you.
That's great. No, I'm sold. I'm gonna, if this doesn't ever work out, I'm gonna go and I'm going to get my degree in surgical technology, be a surgical technologist, and I'm gonna go do just that, because this just sounds like it's something that I feel when you think of being in healthcare, if you don't think you can commit to the doctor route, this is, I mean, you're right there. Like, without you, none of these patients are going to get better. As you're part of the team that makes them get better. It's all of the things that you've mentioned now are just so amazing. It motivates me to at least like that's my plan B if this doesn't work out. So I know that you know we're running up on time. So Randi, what would you say is, you know, if there's for the people that either you're in the middle of your career, you're just starting your career, you're not sure what to do with your career, when anything that comes to surgical technology, what are the final words of wisdom or things that you want people to know about, your profession as a whole or specifically?
So if this is something you've ever considered, and you're just at a different place in your life, you may be 40, 50 years old, and this is something you've always wanted to do. This is one of those quotes that I was referencing at the very beginning, and it's from George Eliot. It's never too late to be what you might have been. It's never too late to take that step. I know that there's so many cliches about going back to school when you're older, or, it really is never too late. If this is the path and this is what's meant for you and this is what gives you joy, I would say ultimately life is too short to do a job or to do anything, to live in any capacity that doesn't bring you joy. Choosing to make that change for yourself isn't selfish. You can't be your best self if you're unhappy. You can't be an example, I'll say, for your kids or for just anybody that looks up to you if you are truly not happy. And so doing something, whether it be anything in your day-to-day life, right down to your profession or just something, some aspect of your life is not satisfactory to you, is not beneficial to you, and it's not bringing you joy, change it. It is never too late to be what you might have been. And I strongly encourage you to do that. If med school is not a route for you, so I kind of went that route at one point, and I'm a single mom of 4. I wasn't at the time, but even having the support, of my ex-husband, it was the hardest thing I ever did. I got through 2.5 semesters of it, and I mean, it by far the hardest thing I ever did. I missed so many things with my kids that it became something I no longer took joy in. And I was not going to lose that relationship with my children, but I also didn't want to lose my love for healthcare. And so that may be something in my future. It's never too late to be what I might have been, right? But for now, this is something that provides me with joy. This is something that has built a lasting level of passion in me for patient care, for patient connection, but also just being an exemplary medical professional that others can look up to. If I can say anything at the end of my career, it's that I've impacted someone at some level. And I think that that's the goal. I think that that's what makes all of us better, not just in healthcare profession, but in life. You should hope to leave a legacy of impact. And like I said, it's never too late. Even if you think it is, you think that this path is too hard, I would say being miserable or just being unhappy in whatever you've chosen is probably 10 times harder than whatever you might have to overcome to find the thing that ignites your passion.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I love that quote too. It's exactly what I think, that all of the things that we talk about, why we do what we do over here at WISBE is for that exact reason, because we hope that people can hear what you've brought to the table and an idea that in healthcare, you can impact people's lives to that degree without being a doctor. And there's so many different paths in healthcare. We hope that people can find one and help make a difference in people's lives. Thank you so much, Randi, for being with us today, sharing your stories, talking about all the things. Is there anything else that we missed that you need to let people know?
Okay, don't kill me for this, nurses. I love you guys. What I do, what a certified surgical technologist does, we are not nurses. We are not a surgical nurse. We have our own specialized training. We sit for a totally different board. We have a totally different level of specialization. So I would encourage everybody, whether you're medical or not, to just really be identified with what the people in your healthcare team are, who they are, what their jobs are, what their training level is. I encourage you to, if you are a certified surgical technologist, to stand strong in that title. Own it, walk high, because you have earned the right to be recognized for all that you stand for, but more importantly, for the importance of what you do. I can't tell you how many surgeons have told me time and time again that they could not do what we do, but more importantly, they can't do what they do without us. We are absolutely someone that is considered a backbone of the OR, but we are somebody that most people don't even know we exist. So I hope to kind of spread awareness for my profession. I hope to spread some inspiration for anybody wanting to step into this role. But I really hope that for the general population or general public that might be looking into this, that you all understand the importance of this position. And as I said before, trying to get some legislation put in place, that you understand that this is for best patient outcomes, and demanding that level of specialization, that level of credentialing is very important. And as speaking for all professionals that do what I do, I'm sure I can tell you it has just been my absolute pleasure to care for you and your family. If I've ever been in on your surgical team or touched your life in any way, it has just been my absolute pleasure. So thank you all for that.
Well, Randi, thank you for the time today and giving us all this wonderful knowledge. And hopefully, if there's something else down the line that where our paths cross, we can talk more later about those things. And all the best.
Thank you. You as well.